Hey, welcome everyone. This is Studio W, The Buzz, your global radio network. Hey, we circle this thing 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with the finest in broadcasting found anywhere around the globe. And now, as usual, the World on Finance, hey, with your host, Mr. Everett James. Good morning, sir.
Yes,
It's morning on the West
yes. Good
Coast.
morning. And are you receiving me okay from the West Coast?
All right. Yes, from the West Coast, I can hear. I am receiving your uh, voice loud and clear. And so,
Wonderful.
what's on the lineup today?
Okay. Well, in view of all of the excitement about the upcoming election, November 5th of this year, there's a great deal of talk, at least. Certainly in California, and so I'm going to designate the first part of the program to the things that are will be on the ballot that are of concern in California. But I want the listeners to recognize that all of the things I mentioned have duplicate issues on their own individual states, no matter where they live in the country.
Okay. All right. I'm going to step back
Okay.
and listen to the program.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Brown, and welcome, listening audience. This is Everett James, your trusty tax reporter, coming to you every Wednesday at 10 a.m., 10 a.m. to approximately 11, or sometimes a few minutes later. The subject is update on your taxes. This includes federal taxes as well as some local taxes in the state, and am certainly willing to focus on some individual states with a limited amount of time if it is so requested by the listener. So, for you folks who do have a question or a comment on the program, please make yourself a part of this particular program, and you can call in your questions and your comments to 951-522-9877. To repeat, 951-522-9877. And for those who are more comfortable with the internet, please feel free to send in your comments and your questions to evjtax1 at gmail.com. To repeat, evjtax1 at gmail.com. Just don't spell out the one, just the numeral. And whatever questions are proposed, this this broadcaster will make every attempt to respond to the question in full at the next week's program. Okay, folks, here we are. I'm already receiving election materials regarding a general election that is scheduled for November 5th, literally days away from us. And so we are going to take a quick look at some of the propositions, at least one or two of the propositions. There are going to be approximately 10 propositions on your ballot, and I'll designate this part of the program to folks who live in California. Keep in mind that what goes in California typically is repeated in other states across the country. So I'm certain that your ballots, whatever state you're in, is going to have similar type propositions, and typically they have to do with funding new projects and new programs. However, California has probably been one of the states that has gone to excess, running up the debt To begin with, back in 1879, folks, there was a constitutional requirement in the Constitution, and it stated no county, city, town, township, board of education, or school district shall incur any indebtedness or liability in any manner or for any purpose without the consent and approval of two-thirds of the qualified electors. Well, that particular constitutional requirement has already been broken. It was broken back in at the beginning of the century, back in around 2000, when it exempted the school districts from having to meet that requirement. And unfortunately, since then, there's been funding measures that have been passed. Back in 2000, the requirement was for just school districts. The funding of the requirement was changed from two-thirds approval to 55% approval instead of the two-thirds. So, unfortunately, that's how many of the school districts across the state of California, at least, have been obtaining their funding, but running the state into huge deficits. This requirement is now being presented. The school district requirement, the 55% now, is now being attempted to be placed and approved for all other funding, not just for schools. And and what it is called, it's in the Proposition 5. Technically Proposition 5 really is not supposed to apply to debt for everything. It's supposedly only debt for infrastructure, which pretty much is everything. But unfortunately, it has been construed to be eligible to use for all kinds of funding, housing projects, and programs. Proposition 5 is one of the 10 propositions that has engendered or garnered a large amount of opposition because it would continue to overload the debt resources of the state. The Proposition 5 up in the Northern California is being applied to the voters, and it's called a Regional Measure 4. And Regional Measure 4 up in the Silicon Valley area of California, well, it means that the proposition would be declared passed if it receives just 55% of the vote. So, Proposition 5 has, as I said, generated a great deal of opposition, and the recommendation, at least from this broadcaster, would be to, if you're a registered voter, keep you may already have received that ballot in the mail. Don't be shy. Even if you're a newbie at this business, tear open that envelope, dive right into the local measures, you may even see moans of pleasure coming from the so-called infrastructure and affordable housing, unquote, bonds inserted into the ballot, unfortunately. But if you do the math on this, you'll quickly find out that that's going to add a great deal of money, hundreds of dollars per year, onto a median price house. If you take your annual tax increase and multiply it by 30 years, you'll just see how much of the bonds are going to cost you over time. Well, first you have the recommendation, or one of the recommendations is to call your neighbors, tell them not to throw out their ballot, because voting no on Proposition 5 and mailing it right back is one of the recommendations you can do to stop that tax hike. That's easier than buying a lottery ticket, and the odds of winning are a lot better. Now, as I mentioned earlier, another category of bonds is school bonds, but as I think I may have pointed out, that already falls into the category of about 55% approval instead of 2/3, and a lot of pundits, have publicized that it's a good thing for some of those bond supporters, because if the school bonds, obtain that 55% approval at the current time instead of the 2/3, they'll be passed. But as I mentioned, that's that special amendment that was made 24 years ago, and that was primarily in an attempt to address the concerns of a lot of parents and other folks who are involved in the school system, to remove asbestos and to remove lead from school buildings. So that would really increase the tax that citizens are having to pay. Beware, in addition to what are called citizens initiative tax increases. That oftentimes just benefits public employee unions, developers who receive government contracts, and nonprofit groups that pay six-figure salaries to their executives to, quote, manage homelessness programs funded by your tax dollars. All of these groups are oiled up and wallowing in the pressure of passing tax increases. And these tax increases are going to be paying for these large salaries to executives to manage homelessness programs funded by your tax dollars. So mark your calendar to be alert for these propositions, which a booklet will come in the mail to you. The important thing is to be aware and be vocal, because these tax increases, and I'd say just about all of the 10 propositions that are going to be in the ballot this year have to do with funding one thing or another. I think there may be one or two propositions that are for other purposes, but this broadcaster will make an attempt at next week's and a few weeks thereafter of focusing just on the propositions. There may be one or two that are worthy of your voter support, but the majority of them are for tax increases. And that's something that we don't, most households do not need at this point of high inflation. Okay, with that said, I'd like to share with you the an article in the Sun, San Bernardino Sun, entitled "Can We Afford Health Care for Undocumented Immigrants?" And it's by the author is Susan Shelley, who's a columnist. California is now providing the full scope of Medi-Cal benefits to undocumented immigrants. Wow, how did we get there? Full scope Medi-Cal, called Medicaid in other states, it's just called Medi-Cal in California, covers primary and preventative care, specialist prescription drugs, and other services. Now, previously, immigrants without legal status were eligible only for restricted scope Medi-Cal. Restricted scope Medi-Cal provided benefits for such things as emergency room visits and pregnancy-related care. But effective this year, January 1st of 2024, all California residents who meet the income eligibility requirements, regardless of immigration status, are now eligible for full scope Medi-Cal benefits. How did we get here? The policy was advanced piecemeal. So all this took place piecemeal. First, beginning in 2016, full scope Medi-Cal benefits were granted to children just under the age of 19, regardless of immigration status. And that was it was given to them as long as they met all of the other eligibility requirements. Okay, well, that was expanded to young adults through age 25 in 2020. So, like about 4 years from 2016, it was expanded to young adults through age 25. Well, 2 years later, after 2020, this policy was expanded again to include anyone age 50 or over. And then, wow, it was expanded a fourth time on January 1st of this year, 2024. The missing group, adults age 26 through 29, all of a sudden became entitled to the same full scope Medi-Cal benefits that are available to low-income citizens and legal residents of California. I mentioned, repeat that again. As of January 1st, the missing group of adults that weren't covered before, age 26 through 29, all of a sudden they became entitled to exactly the full scope Medi-Cal benefits that are currently enjoyed by legal residents and low-income citizens of the state. So right now, folks, there are now approximately 14 million people, roughly 1/3 of California's population, on Medi-Cal. State officials said the latest edition could add another 700,000 people to the rolls and will cost about $3 billion per year. So in truth, really, nobody has any idea just how many people will be added to the rolls or what will be the cost. Medi-Cal is an entitlement program. Anybody who meets the eligibility requirement is entitled to enroll in it, and then they're entitled to have Medi-Cal cover the cost of whatever medical services they need. The latest expansion, was approved by lawmakers, in 2022, and then tucked into SB 184, one of those lengthy trailer bills that gets rushed through the legislature in a matter of days without going through the usual committee process. Now, if lawmakers had taken the time to read the bill, this sentence might have jumped out at them. The federal Medicaid program prohibits payments to a state for medical assistance furnished to an alien who is not lawfully admitted for permanent residence or otherwise permanently residing in the United States. That means, folks, that California, if they do continue with these expansions of the Medicaid program, it means California will not receive federal matching funds to help pay for the extension of that full scope Medi-Cal. So guess what? The cost of this new entitlement on California, who's bearing it? It's on you, the California taxpayers. The politicians can stand pompously in front of cameras and then say, oh, healthcare is a human right. But healthcare is a service provided by skilled and trained people. There really can't be a right to anything that has to be provided by someone else. How about your rights? To stretch the state's funds while enrolling more people to receive benefits, California sharply limits the amount that health care providers will be paid for treating Medicaid patients. And as a result, doctors right now, and have been for a long time, they really limit the number of Medi-Cal patients that they will accept. Medi-Cal reimburses providers at roughly 70% of the rate that Medicare pays, and Medicare pays far less than employer-paid health care. So the employer-paid health care reimburses the most, then under that, Medicare pays the next greater amount, and Medi-Cal, of course, pays the least in reimbursements to the doctors. So that's something that you might want to, folks in California might want to keep in mind with these ongoing expansions of the public service, programs. California is currently facing a $68 billion budget shortfall. What's the plan? Well, you might guess it's going to be just continuing to tax folks at a higher and higher rate to help cover the cost of these expansion of these welfare expansion programs. Okay, while we're in that, on that subject, what about Social Security? That's really on a totally unsustainable path. The Social Security is still facing enormous shortfalls. It will become insolvent at the current rate within the next 10 years. And nobody is really going to be able to avoid this reality. And this applies to everyone, not just to California. But despite decades of politically expedient denial, both presidential candidates, Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump, have announced they will not touch the program. That's such a hot political subject that, unfortunately, there's no politician that is really willing to face up to that issue. And one thing that I do disagree with, as far as Mr. Trump's policies, is that he wants to he wants to reduce the amount of taxes that seniors are already paying on their Social Security. But of course, the reality is that if he wants to reduce those taxes on Social Security, guess what? That makes the program even more insolvent. So really, Social Security continues to be in a huge financial mess. The current benefits, the taxes, the taxes on Social Security benefits bring in about $87 billion in revenue each year. And then, of course, in addition, there's the payroll tax revenue. Even still, that Social Security is still insolvent. Currently, it's projected that the main Social Security trust fund will dry out by 2033. Now, according to the Committee for a Responsible Budget, exempting Social Security benefits from taxation would move the date forward where the trust fund is totally insolvent, and that will move it up to 2032. That's only what 7 years off. Why should you care, folks, about this? Well, this is in the law that the law requires that if this insolvency happens, Social Security benefits will mandatorily have to be cut by 23% unless Congress reforms the program. Now, can you? Most of you out there, particularly if you're in retirement years or already drawing Social Security, can you handle that kind of a reduction in your monthly Social Security benefit? 23%, over a fifth of a cut. If that happens, it's worth remembering that insolvency really is, in fact, the reason why these taxes were actually adopted, in the first place. And the decision to tax the benefits really didn't happen until 1983, and unfortunately, that happened under the stewardship of Ronald Reagan, a Republican. Congress really should have reformed the program way more fundamentally back then. But, the way the program was initially designed, they just baked in eventual insolvency. But Congress has been taking a more politically convenient, less responsible route, and we're really paying the price today for this political cowardice. Lifting taxes on Social Security would also be very unfair. Now, contrary to common belief, seniors are really overrepresented in the top income quintile. I say contrary to common belief, seniors are overrepresented in the top income quintile. As they have written, some advisors have written, seniors have the lowest poverty rate of any age group, and their average household incomes have grown 4 times as fast as the average worker since 1980. Comparatively, it's the younger folks who are really carrying the burden, but the younger people who are working, they're the ones who are really paying for the seniors' benefits, and in addition, the younger folks are more likely to be in the bottom of the income distribution. In this way, Social Security is really redistributing benefits from the lower income folks to the higher income Americans. Now, lifting the taxes on Social Security would even make this inequity even worse. And I think that recognition that who is actually paying the tab for the continued high Social Security benefits are the young folks. But then again, because of the ramping and the continually escalating inflation, the benefits continue to go up each year. So just looking at that way, seniors are already getting more in Social Security benefits than they actually pay in. Now, according to Urban Institute calculation by a married couple with 2 average earners retiring in 2025, retiring next year, they will receive $31,000 in benefits over their lifetime, but they will have only paid in to the program $783,000. The bottom line is that some seniors could absolutely absorb a reform in benefits. Lifting taxes on these relatively well-to-do seniors instead is really a slap in the face for younger and poorer current workers. The bottom line is that exempting Social Security benefits from taxation is really a bad idea fiscally. So why propose it? Well, as we know, it's political time, and the political candidates full well know that the minute you mention Social Security, that is going to cause many people to reconsider their support for you. Because politicians get rewarded when they promise to enrich voters, including showering them with cash benefits and doing exactly what is happening now by the federal government, showering them not only with cash, showering them with special grocery certificates, showering them with the special other rewards. A new paper by the American Enterprise Institute, Stan Venger, Veuger, University of California, Los Angeles, Julia Payson, made some remarks, and she looked at pandemic era spending, and that from her studies, it showed that politicians are rewarded at the ballot box for doling out deficit finance benefits and making future generations, our grandchildren, and our children, pay the cost. So it's really a no-win, situation. So to conclude, the majority of the propositions on our current ballots, some of the more onerous propositions are Proposition 5 and Proposition 2 and 4, which are funding $20 billion more in debt for school buildings and climate projects, green energy projects. We did have, or at least in California, they really did blow the state legislators. They blew $100 billion budget surplus. And now we face in California multiple years of budget deficits. But now, rather than slow down their spending, the California legislatures decided to try to borrow another $20 billion to keep it going. Proposition 2 on the November ballot asked voters to approve a $10 billion in bond debt for school buildings, and Proposition 4 seeks approval for $10 billion to fund an assortment of programs claiming to need that to fight climate change. So, bonds are the most expensive way to pay for anything, nearly double the cost of pay as you go from the annual budget. The Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association recommends a no vote on Proposition 2, Proposition 4, and Proposition 5. So those are some of the recommendations from one of the more relevant and informative groups in the state. Governor Gavin Newsom recently declared a budget emergency because the state spends a heck of a lot more than it takes in. Proposition 2 will result in higher local property taxes because school districts must come up with a local match of funds in order to qualify to receive state bond funds. Proposition 2, would really, pay for construction of new schools at a time when enrollment in schools, as you may have heard, is declining. According to the State Department of Finance, California experienced a sixth consecutive decrease in public school enrollment. Okay, so, with that, there is some good news on the tax front, and for California taxpayers who own property. It's pretty easy these days, to pay your property taxes twice a year, and for folks who are doing well in exorbitant amounts. Here's a couple questions that might be of some help. Question: if I can't pay my property taxes, is there any help for me? Wow. Well, if you received a property tax bill, and this applies just to California, if you got a bill that you can't afford to pay, you may, and I emphasize you may be able to benefit from the property tax postponement program run by the state comptroller's office. Now, this just applies to California, not to other states, but I would not be surprised if there are similar programs that are now being devised or even being offered in most of the other states of the union. The property tax postponement program, and the anachronism is the PTP program, that allows eligible homeowners to postpone payment of current year property taxes on their primary residence. Well, it's essentially a loan. It's secured by a lien against the property. The interest rate is 5% per year, computed monthly on a simple interest basis. So while we rail against going further into debt, this might be a way of dealing with some tax bills that many folks are facing who really are not able to see how they're going to pay that in one chunk amount. Now, as an example, if you have a postponed $1,000 in taxes, well, if it's like, for example, say a tax payment of $3,000, you just multiply the example that I'm presenting by 3. So if you, you could multiply it by whatever percentage over that $1,000 your taxes are. But the interest on $1,000 in taxes, the interest would come to about $50 per year, or approximately $4.17 per month. Interest continues to accrue until all the postponed property taxes plus interest are repaid to the state. That's to the state of California. The homeowner may repay all or part of the balance at any time. The full amount, including interest, becomes due and payable when the homeowner does any one of the following, and there's a number of things that I'll repeat. Moving from the property, number 1. Number 2, selling or conveying title to the property. Number 2. 3, dies and does not have a spouse, registered domestic partner, or other qualified individual who continues to reside in the property. 4, allows future property taxes or other senior liens to become delinquent. And refinances or obtains a reverse mortgage for the property. Okay, so it was about 5 conditions: moving from the property, selling the property, passing away, not having a spouse or qualified individual who will continue to live there. 4, allowing the future property taxes or other senior liens to become delinquent, and then refinancing or obtaining a reverse mortgage. So delinquent taxes from previous years may not be postponed. The program applies only to the current year property taxes. That's important. To be eligible for the PTP program, a homeowner must meet these requirements for every year in which a postponement of property taxes is desired. Be at least 62 years of age, or blind or disabled. Own or occupy the property as his or her principal place of residence, such as floating homes or houseboats. By the way, houseboats are not eligible. Number 3, you have to have a total household income of less than $53,574. Again, you have to have a total household income of less than $53,574. Number 4, have at least 40% equity in the property and not have a reverse mortgage on the property. That's going to kick out a lot of people, that fifth condition. That funding, of course, is limited. It's distributed on a first-come, first-served basis. Can you imagine a number of folks who are going to be applying for this? The application period opens on, October 1 of this year. October 1, folks, and runs through February 10th of next year, 2025. Applications are available now from the State Controller's Office. If you want to get additional information on the property tax postponement program in California, call 1-800-952-5661 or email postponement@sco.california.gov. Let me repeat that again, because this has got to be something a good number of California residents are going to jump on immediately. This would cover if you do have that property tax coming up. Is there any help for you? Well, if you've received a property tax bill, you may, and I underline may, be able to benefit from the PTP, Property Tax Postponement Program, run by the State Controller's Office. Folks, I'm sure that there's probably programs similar to this in your individual states, or at least programs that are being considered now in your individual states. But that would allow eligible homeowners to postpone, and I say postpone, the payment of current year property taxes on their primary residence. Obviously, this can't be applied to a secondary residence or a rental residence. It's essentially a loan secured by a lien against your property. The interest rate is 5% per year, computed monthly on a simple interest basis. As an example, on a postponement of $1,000 in taxes, interest would be $50 a year. Interest continues to accrue. Homeowners may repay all of that at any time. The full amount, including interest, becomes due and payable when the homeowner does any of the following, and these are important. All of that becomes due if and when you move, sell the property, you pass away, and don't have a spouse or registered domestic partner or other qualified individual continuing to live in the property. And then you allow future property taxes or other liens to become delinquent. And the last one is you refinanced or obtained a reverse mortgage for the property. The delinquent taxes not postponed. This program only applies, folks, to current year property taxes. And for you to meet these requirements in California, some of the requirements are the eligibility requirements are have to be at least 62 years of age, or blind, or disabled. own the property as your principal of residence. Houseboats or floating homes are not eligible. Have a total household income of $53,000 or less. That's going to kick out a lot of people right there. Have at least 40% equity in the property and not have a reverse mortgage on the property. That fifth condition is also going to disqualify a good number of people. So extremely limited eligibility. It opens on October 1st of this year and runs through February 10th of next year. And then that's a limited period of time. Any questions on that postponement program? Call 800-952-5661 or email postponement at sco.ca.gov. That is postponement at sco.ca.gov. So it's with that we'll move into some of the other things that taxpayers need to be aware of. And that's to apply to everybody, all citizens of the tax-paying citizens of the country. Keep in mind that here we are getting very close to an October 15th deadline. Well, the October 15th deadline applies to individual tax returns and calendar year C corporations that are on extension. So if any folks in the audience have filed an extension for that 2023 tax return or calendar year C corporations, straight C corporations, there's the deadline for getting that tax return in, just the filing part of it, is coming up October 15th, which is, really, approximately about 3 weeks off. Now that the only exception to that is for folks who live in federally declared disaster areas, and of course they've been those due dates have been automatically extended by IRS. Okay, so number two thing that you need to remember is we're coming up on deadlines for making a 2023 contribution to a KEO plan that was established before January 1st of this year, setting up a SEP IRA for your business and depositing funds for 2023. Plus, there's a deadline for withdrawing excess IRA pay-ins, because that does happen more than you probably will want to recognize. Folks, in an effort to build up their retirement accounts, wind up putting more money into their IRA retirement accounts than they're eligible to do. Also, for folks who have foreign incomes, if you have a foreign income account and you haven't reported on it by now, the law dictates that United States individuals must report overseas accounts if in 2023 the total combined balance at any time in the account exceeded $10,000. And the $10,000 is a marker. And there are penalties, really severe penalties, for not reporting. Again, our contact point for questions and comments is 951 phone number, 951-522-9877, Everett James. And for email contact for your questions and comments, evjtax1@gmail.com, Everett James. We implore you to take part in the program by calling in or mailing in your comments and questions to be answered in the following week's program. Okay, folks. If you are falling in the category of being hopeful of reporting and deducting gambling losses, well, if you have a large gambling loss on a Schedule C, that's an audit red flag. Generally, your losses in gambling, the general rule is you can't really deduct. You can only deduct the losses up to the point of your winnings. So you can't go above that winning amount in your losses deductions. Failing to report gambling winnings, that draws a lot of IRS attention. Casinos must file Form W-2G with IRS for each person who wins $1,200 or more. So that $1,200 is a marker. But anybody who wins $1,200 or more in bingo or slots, that's the market, $1,200. You got to report that winning. The winning in Keno, Keno, is $1,500. Anything that wins that or more has to report it. And the winning for poker tournaments is $5,000. IRS does have an automatic program that matches data on third-party information returns, and it's on the W-2G, and that does show income and deduction amounts shown on individual return. Now, if there's a mismatch with a significant discrepancy, you will hear from IRS. So keep in mind the IRS is cracking on those areas. So keep in mind that the election day is really only a month or so away, and of course, taxes are on the ballot, as we've talked about earlier. For bonds, they're definitely on the ballot. But regarding taxes federally, it's extremely important for taxpayers to recognize that that 2017 tax law, the tax decreases and the Job Act that was passed in 2017, that extended the tax breaks for you, and is one of the reasons that really for the years following Donald Trump's presidency, the tax law has been very generous to all citizens, regardless of their political stripe. Kamala Harris, Democratic nominee, is sticking with her pledge: no taxes, no tax increases if you make less than $400,000. Well, we take this to mean that she would give her support to extending the tax breaks in the 2017 law to people earning less than $400,000, which are most taxpayers. I don't know if that will happen, but I guess it's a possibility that if she wins the election coming up November 5th, that tax pledge could possibly be fulfilled. So keep in mind that if, however, you're in the high income bracket, you're going to pay more in taxes if the Democratic nominee gets her way, and the Democratic nominee would bring back the top 39.6 income tax rate for most folks making 400,000 or more. The wealthy would pay more in capital gains. Similar to Biden, the Democratic nominee would want to tax unrealized gains upon death. Ooh, that proposal would treat death as a realization event for income tax purposes, and they would consider death as as what they call a deemed taxable sale at fair market value. A deemed taxable sale at fair market value, and you'd have to pay capital gains on the decedent's final income tax return. Following along in that same vein, the Democratic nominee, might back 5% minimum income tax on the ultra rich. Families, first-time home buyers, tip workers, and others would get breaks. Families, first-time home buyers, people who get tips, and others would get breaks. She'd bring back the 2021 expansion to the child tax credit, but she's even talked about increasing that amount on the child tax credit from $2,000 per child to $3,600 with monthly payments and full refundability. Wow. And, she would even make it bigger, folks. She'd give taxpayers probably a taxpayer a one-time child credit of $6,000 to be claimed on the parent's tax return for the first year of the child's life. Well, I don't know how likely that is to take place. That's pretty extreme. Well, some other proposals that might be given is giving first-time home buyers a credit of up to $10,000. Now, this credit has been talked about many, many times and has been done in the past, by the way. So that could happen. Among other proposals, extending the expansion to Obamacare subsidies, allowing more people to get credits for buying health insurance through the marketplace. Now, of course, and then there's been talk about making income that you get from tips, making that tax-free. Although now there's no information coming from either of the candidates on what they would do with the state and the SALT deductions, the state and local tax deductions. That's what is claimed on the 1040 Schedule A, and that's your state and local taxes. As you know, because of the 2017 tax legislation back in 2017 under Trump, that deduction was limited to $10,000, and of course that's why the taxpayers from a lot of the high tax states, New York, Connecticut, New Jersey, California, are screaming bloody murder trying to get rid of that limitation, the $10,000 limitation on the Schedule A. But there have been some proposals from both sides of the aisle on removing that limitation on that deduction that you might be able to take on the Schedule A. And then, of course, for business taxes, the Democratic nominee has suggested raising the 21% corporate tax rate, to 28%. I'm really not too certain how far that's going to go on either side of from folks on either side of the aisle, raising the 21% corporate rate to 28%. I can just hear the business community reacting to that now, but of course negatively reacting to that. The nominee has indicated that she would increase the 15% alternative minimum tax on very big corporations to 21%. She'd do away with what she and many Democratic lawmakers see as tax loopholes. while keeping the green energy tax subsidies enacted in the Inflation Reduction Act. And she's also proposed a new credit for home buyers who build starter homes. That might be something that might get support from both sides of the aisle. So, folks, we may be running out of time here, but regarding the dependent care credit, which is very, very popular and very frequent, it's very, very frequent credit taken by a taxpayer. Expenses for your care of your children under the age of 13, and this is now just for the dependent care credit, not the child tax credit, but the dependent care credit. The credit that's claimed on Form 2441. Expenses for the care of your kids under 13 and other qualifying relatives is also used. 2441 is also used for your parents, qualifying relatives, who are not able to take care of themselves. But they have to be, the expenses have to be incurred so you can work or look for employment. So that's a lot of folks are able to qualify because maybe they don't have a job, but they're actually in the process of looking for work. And believe me, if you claim a hefty dependent care credit, you better have proof showing that you're out there hoofing it or looking for work or actually traveling to find work, taking the public transportation to find work, or Uber to find work, or renting a car to look for work. Now, if you're taking the credit to help care for a relative who is not a qualifying child, such as your aging parent or grandparent, that person also needs to have lived with you for more than 6 months during the year and be unable to care for him or herself. They can't take care of themselves. Okay, folks, that credit is worth 20 to 35%, up to $3,000 in care expenses. It would be up to $6,000 if you have 2 or more dependents needing care. Okay, and that would make the maximum credit for 2024 to $1,050 for one dependent and $2,100 for 2 or more dependents. Okay, folks, I guess we'll have to end that now, and we'll look forward to your questions and comments and next week's